News Radio 1290 WNBF, WNBF.com. On a Monday morning, 8 days before Election Day, this is our Binghamton Mayoral debate. Republican incumbent Richard David and his Democratic challenger Tarik Abdelazim live in our studio. I'm Bob Joseph. The candidates have not seen the questions, but they say they're prepared to address any topic, and we will try to cover a range of important issues that will be on the minds of the voters in Binghamton a week from tomorrow on November 7th. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good morning, Bob.
We had a coin toss a few minutes ago, and by virtue of the coin toss, the first opening statement, will go to Tarik Abdelazim.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, for hosting. I want to thank the mayor for serving the last 4 years and agreeing to a rigorous series of debates. I really appreciate that. I also want to thank all those who are listening. Many folks know a bit about my background. I was born and raised here. I'm a proud father. I'm a Southside homeowner. And I care deeply about this community and its future. Many folks know that the last 3 years I've been serving as a national blight expert, traveling this country, helping communities turn around distressed neighborhoods, and also addressing many of the challenges that we face here in Binghamton. I think it's no secret that I also served in the last Democratic administration for 8 years, and I think it's important to frame today's discussion in that context. There was a team that led the city through 8 of its most challenging years, where we faced a city on the brink of financial ruin. We had to endure and lead the community through 3 traumatic and historic floods, through an economic recession that hadn't been seen anything of the likes in 80 years. And the goal was always to set the next mayor up for success. I think that's exactly what happened. We had a dead downtown that has turned into a thriving urban core. We had a city that was basically bankrupt, sliding towards ruin, where its city finances are in the strongest position they'd been in decades. We had queued up millions of dollars in federal and state infrastructure dollars for the next administration. So the question really is, in this election, is about, has my opponent seized that golden opportunity or squandered it? And I think what many folks don't know is that it's been even better than that. Over the last 4 years, pension and health insurance costs have dropped $3 million. And sales tax revenue has increased $1 million. So the mayor has had plenty of resources, has had an updated city hall that was able to do more with less. And I think that when folks get a better understanding, peeking behind the altered headlines and the never-ending, beautifully polished commercial, they find out that things aren't what they seem, that there's not much there, or that there's a pattern of incompetence, mismanagement, and missed opportunities. So I look forward to discussing today both my opponent's record as well as the plans that I've outlined that I think have inspired a lot of folks.
Thank you, Mr. Abdelazim. Mayor David, your opening statement.
Good morning, Bob. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I thank my opponent also for agreeing to show up. We have had a series of in-depth debates. I recall that when I ran for mayor in 2013, I spent months knocking on doors across Binghamton, speaking with thousands of residents, and I heard the same message over and over again from people of all parties. It was time for a change. And over, people told me they were tired of living in a city where the focus was not on them or local issues that they cared about, but was instead on high-profile political stunts that had no effect on their day-to-day lives. They were concerned about crime, neglected infrastructure, blight, quality of life issues, and despite some of the highest taxes in New York State, they felt like nothing was getting done in their city. And since I took office, my team at City Hall is focused on these very issues. Adding 9 officers in the police department, making our streets safer, and starting the process of growing back a police force decimated by my opponent's administration, which cut 20 police officer positions as crime in the city remained a concern. In our neighborhoods, we've demolished more than 60 dilapidated buildings, partnered with developers to move plans off the drawing boards for much-needed quality, affordable housing. We've fixed more streets than ever before, paving approximately 1/3 of Binghamton's roads in 4 years, more than my opponent's administration accomplished in twice the time. We've upgraded the city's 6,700 streetlights to LED technology, creating safer, better lit streets, and saving taxpayer dollars and energy costs. We put Binghamton in the spotlight for the right reasons, making it the first American city to meet a White House challenge to end veterans' homelessness and the first Southern Tier city recognized as a clean energy community by the governor's office. After years of decline, our downtown is thriving again, with new restaurants and businesses filling up empty storefronts, and one-of-a-kind events like Luma making Binghamton a destination for people across New York State and beyond. And for the first time in 20 years, homeowners and business owners have seen their taxes decrease in consecutive years. The bottom line here is my opponent had his opportunity. He had 8 years to take action and deliver results, but those issues weren't important to him, not until I put them front and center. I look forward, over the course of the next 4 years, to continue to deliver results to residents.
Thank you, Mayor David. And the first question will be posed to Mayor David. Republicans, city and county Republicans, have framed this election as a referendum on Mayor Matthew Ryan, your predecessor. How do you expect Binghamton residents will react to that effort to frame this? Basically, do you want a third term for Matthew Ryan?
Well, Bob, I would disagree with the premise of that question. I don't think anyone has framed this on a referendum on the former mayor. This is a referendum on the David administration and the results I have delivered over the course of the past 4 years. You heard me outline in my opening statement many of the areas that we touched on, whether it was making our city safer, dealing with infrastructure, dealing with taxes, our parks and neighborhoods, and most importantly, jobs. The City Hall and the mayor, we don't create the jobs. We create the environment that's conducive for investors and businesses to invest their money to create jobs, for residents to live, work, and raise a family. So the bottom line is my opponent is part of the previous administration. That is part of his portfolio and his record, as he indicated in his opening statement. And so we are two very different candidates. And so I do believe that my opponent represents a third term of former Mayor Matt Ryan. And I have my own record to stand by. I have a record with the Bucci administration, and I have a record as a private citizen and a business owner and an investor. And I think I have the best combination of public sector and private sector experience to continue to move this city forward.
Mr. Abdelazim, indeed, clearly based on campaign mailers and comments made by the Broome County Republican chairman, many Republicans are casting this as a question, do you want a third term of Matt Ryan? What do you think about that?
Well, I thought it was interesting. My opponent started answering the question as, no, I don't frame it this way. And then he finished the question saying, yes, I am framing it this way. It's the same kind of flip-flopping and kind of disingenuous rhetoric that we've seen throughout this campaign. Look, my opponent knows that everything that he's been able to accomplish in these last 4 years was because of the hard work of the last administration, working in partnership with community, with business leaders, with city council, with union representatives, right, through the most challenging times. And I could put something on the table right here. You know, they try to constantly cast aspersions on the last Democratic administration about this tax rate. You remember, right? I mean, Bucci's the last 8 years, he raised taxes 52%, right? And they raided the piggy bank. You covered over a massive deficit year over year. But what were the outcomes? Is that the city was sliding towards financial ruin, basically depleted the city's resources. You left a Regency Hotel with a $7 million debt. There was blight littered all over the neighborhood because of a bad tax sale deal that you guys made in 2003. We cleaned up that mess. Right? So, yeah, the taxes did go up during the most challenging time the city has ever faced. But again, what was the result? What were the outcomes? $9.5 million in the piggy bank, right? A Regency Hotel that's turned into a luxury Class A destination downtown, a dead downtown that is thriving. So there are many values that I share with the Democrats in the last administration, but I have never served as mayor before, and that this will be my first opportunity. And the citizens should judge this administration both on the performance of the last 4 years when given a golden opportunity, and my plans, which are far more comprehensive and based on both vision, leadership, and expertise in turning around distressed neighborhoods.
Next question will be directed first to Mr. Abdelazim, and it deals with crime. What new initiatives would you consider implementing to reduce Binghamton's crime rate?
Absolutely, and this is one of those things where we have to evaluate. My opponent stands here and says that he's produced results. He hasn't. He's taken an approach, and his approach has been to add a few more officers and to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on license plate readers. That's not my approach, because what are the outcomes? Has it worked? Do people feel safer? No, I've been at the doors. People have told me they don't. We had the most violent year in decade last year, because it's not really getting to the root causes of crime, Bob. That's not an approach. That's an approach of yesterday. We need forward-thinking solutions. So I have said again and again that what we're going to do is make fiscally responsible investments in the root causes of crime: a lack of jobs and poverty, too many youth without hope, lost to gangs and violence, and obviously the very serious challenge of addiction and mental illness. Right? That is what is happening all across this country with forward-thinking leadership, and it's actually producing results. I agree with the Republican DA, Steve Cornwell, who said that when he stopped seeing addiction as a criminal justice matter and a public health emergency and connecting addicts who've committed crime with humane treatment, that he's seen a direct correlation in dropped in petty theft. That's the approach I'm going to take. It's going to be far more effective, and it's going to be more fiscally responsible.
Mayor David, what new initiatives would you consider implementing to help reduce Binghamton's crime rate in the next 4 years?
Well, I find it ironic that my opponent talks about investing in the root causes in crime, yet, once again, this is an area where there was an opportunity given and no action taken. But let's talk about what did happen. There were 20 officers eliminated from the police department. The police department was gutted, and we are still suffering through the impact of that poor decision. That was the approach that my opponent in the previous administration took. My opponent was one of the people that went to city council to advocate for this failed approach and failed policy. We've added back police officers. We've invested in training and equipment in our police department: body cameras, cameras in the cars, new training opportunities. We are investing in root causes of this of crime, things like the opioid epidemic, having police officers carry Narcan. That was one of the first decisions that I made in my first 60 days. The heroin and opioid epidemic didn't start on January 1st, 2014. That wasn't even on the previous administration's radar screen. So we've worked with nonprofit providers like Fairview Recovery Services, investing in treatment programs and programs, working with District Attorney Cornwell, creating programs and initiatives to take a tougher stance and position with regards to drug dealers who sell crime. So we have a multifaceted, comprehensive approach. The previous administration took no approach whatsoever with regards to dealing with the opioid and heroin epidemic, and I think people would be shocked to learn how illy prepared the police department was when I took office January 1st, 2014.
Our next question will be directed first to Mayor David.
Can we continue the discussion or no?
Well, this is going to be a related discussion, and this focuses on police operations. Many officers over the last few years have left the Binghamton Police Department. A lot of senior officers have retired, but also a lot of relatively new officers have left the department, and they've gone elsewhere. And on some shifts, it turns out the street supervisor is only a few years older than most of the other officers. There's not as much experience out on the streets as there had been years ago. What can be done to keep more experienced officers with the Binghamton Police Department?
That's to me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think first we have to talk about why there are morale issues within the police department. Cutting 20 police officers, making it very difficult for officers to get time off, and jeopardizing their safety on the streets had a significant impact on morale with the department. Under the previous administration, we've worked to add more officers to patrol, but certainly we have not added all of those positions back. Going 5 years without a contract, of which my opponent was part of the negotiating team under the previous administration, that had a significant impact on morale. And some of the officers have concerns, disagreements with the current police administration. Again, individuals that were a team that was put together by the previous administration. So there are challenges that exist, and we are doing the best we can to invest in police personnel and training. But I think at the end of the day, the police union, the union that represents the men and women of the police department, they worked with both my opponent and myself. And given the choice between the two of us, they have endorsed me. And I think that's very telling with regards to who they feel is in the best position to support the men and women of the police department and to advance initiatives to keep our community safe. You can't have a safe community without a well-staffed police department. Public safety, without question, is the most important service that City Hall provides. And I do believe that the question is, how effectively are we cleaning up some of the problems that were created by the previous administration?
Mr. Abdelazim, what do you think can be done to keep more experienced officers serving with Binghamton Police Department?
One, listen to them. But let me just talk about a few things here. Here's the commercial, right? The endorsement from PBA and Teamsters. Here's the reality. None of those members voted on that endorsement. None of them. Here's the commercial. I've added a few officers. Here's the reality, is that the morale is absolutely the lowest it's been in decades. The mayor has been presented with those findings, has been shared solutions, and he basically said, I'm done. I'm not working with you. Folks who have friends on the police force can talk with them and can talk with PBA leadership, because that happened.
That's not true.
But let's also talk about some of the other things. You know, I mean, he keeps saying is that there was devastation. There was no money, so we did more with less. There were decisions to right-size the police department, still leaving it the second largest force in upstate among 10 similar upstate municipalities. But we invested in crime technologies that had never been provided before, allowing them to deploy their resources more accurately. But the mayor's had opportunities to make investments. What have those been? Just a few officers, devastated morale, most violent year in decades, right? He talks about investing in addiction. 50,000. He has some resources. Well, I've shared we can invest 200,000 by creatively leveraging federal and state dollars. We're going to get that done. He talks about how he's made investments in youth. No, he's dismantled the Youth Bureau and he's cut funding year over year. I said we are going to make substantial investments in youth, again, creatively leveraging federal and state resources, as I've done with blight, as I've done with beautifying parks, doing more with less. I've done it before and I'll do it again. We can do better.
Staying with public safety, and this question directed first to Mr. Abdelazim regarding fire department operations. What steps would you take to make the fire department more efficient and to control costs? And should a new centralized fire station be considered to replace any existing fire stations?
I don't believe that last thing is an option, centralizing. But here is something that needs to be shared, is that we did the same thing with the fire department. Right-sized the fire department in order to control costs, which has saved taxpayers millions of dollars. And in no way from both fire chief and police chief during those discussions has that compromised neighborhood safety. Here's what we need to recognize, is that the fire have been on the front lines of this opioid epidemic for years. They had always carried Narcan. It wasn't until 2014 that the Attorney General started providing Narcan to communities. It wasn't until 2014 that all the BU campuses started providing their security officers with Narcan. But what can we do? I think we can think about maybe adding ambulance services. And if that's in a way that we can do it without adding additional cost, I'd like to think about that. We've had a few fires, but every day we are losing loved ones to this horrible disease of addiction. If the firefighters on the front line of that, saving lives, maybe we need to think more strategically about reallocating resources. Again, not adding cost, but being more smart and effective with our existing resources.
So, Mayor David, what steps do you think could be taken in the next 4 years to make the fire department more efficient, also to control cost, and should a new centralized station be considered to replace any existing stations?
Sure. I just want to make a couple final comments with regards to police. My opponent continues to say that the police department was right-sized as a result of financial reasons. What he doesn't tell you is while they were cutting police officers, they were adding other positions in other departments, such as the planning department or code enforcement department. In 2014 budget, there were 10 positions slated to be added. None of them were a police officer position.
With federal dollars.
Oh, excuse me. And under our administration's approach, it wasn't all federal dollars. Under this administration's approach, property crime has decreased 14% over the course of the last 3 years, and crime is at overall crime is at the lowest point it's been in approximately 25 years. Yes, there are still challenges with regards to violent crime, and we're focusing on those. Now, with regards to the fire department, I think one very important point that needs to be made is that the fire union, which represents the men and women of the fire department, they have stayed out of mayoral races with regards to endorsements for 30 years. This is the first time they have gotten involved and chosen to endorse me. So what is the reason that the firefighters have decided to get involved is the fact that they know myself and that they know my opponent, and they do not want him coming back to City Hall because they know what his record is on public safety. They have sat on the sidelines for 30 years. They didn't endorse me the first time. They didn't endorse former Mayor Matt Ryan his 2 times. They didn't endorse former Mayor Rich Bucci his 3 times he ran for mayor. They're getting off the sidelines right now because they are that concerned about public safety, and they're that supportive of my approach towards public safety.
Next question will be directed first to Mayor David. This regards neighborhoods. What initiatives would you implement in the next 4 years to improve conditions in city neighborhoods?
Well, you know, this is a great question. It really goes at the heart at what much of this campaign is about. I think we need to do more to stabilize neighborhoods. Take, for example, what's going on Crandall Street right now. Crandall Street is one of the streets in the city that has the highest volume of police calls over the course of 5 years. We've worked with the First Ward Action Council to put in place an $11 million project to purchase and rehabilitate almost every home on that street, which will help stabilize and transform that neighborhood. With regards to properties that we demolished, like the former Big Lots Plaza on the north side, we're working with the Binghamton Housing Authority and a Buffalo-based developer there to put 48 units of affordable housing in that area of the city to, again, help stabilize and transform our neighborhoods. Without question, over the course of the last decade, I think the city has begun to lose control with regards to the growth and development of the neighborhoods. We worked with Broome County government to come up with a deal for the city to acquire relatively inexpensively properties that need to be demolished to keep them out of the hands and to break the cycle of just selling these foreclosed properties over and over and over again to landlords that, quite frankly, are bad and don't take care of them and will rent to anyone. And these properties become a source of problems in our community. We've worked with the land bank. You talk to the land bank. The city of Binghamton is the most aggressive municipality with regards to pursuing money for demolition and rehabilitation of properties.
Mr. Abdelazim, what initiatives would you pursue in the next 4 years to improve the city's neighborhoods?
My entire campaign is about neighborhoods and the people who live there. This is what I get paid to do, to help communities and mayors like Rich David understand far more forward-thinking solutions and creative initiatives to turn around distressed neighborhoods. So let's talk about a few of them. Blight. I've outlined a very comprehensive approach. It's not just swinging the wrecking ball. And if we compare our records on that, I did more with less as the Director of Planning, Housing, Community Development at virtually no cost to the taxpayers. Here's some initiatives. Operation Slumlord, right? We're paying about $11 million in public tax dollars through DSS to house vulnerable seniors, children, and families, and none of those units are being inspected. That is outrageous. And so that's something that we're going to work with the county to accomplish, that we're not going to enrich slumlords one penny to house people in unsafe and unhealthy housing. And we do that by implementing the rental registration ordinance that's been on the books for 4 years that my opponent has not moved on at all. We're going to end the auctions. I like how my opponent's starting to talk just like me. I've worked with communities like Syracuse and Albany and others. We're going to prioritize homeowners. We're going to prioritize responsible landlords. We shouldn't send those to the auction and have them be outbid by slumlords or out-of-town speculators. We're going to deal with Project Zombies, going to deal with bank foreclosures. But, Bob, this is more than just blight. The investment in youth, Project Joy, that is about creating safer neighborhoods. The single greatest threat to the safety of our neighborhoods, the strength of our local tax base, and the value of our homes is the coming tidal wave of high flood insurance premiums, right? My opponent has done nothing on that. This is all about our neighborhoods and the people that live there.
The next question will be directed first to Mr. Abdelazim, and it involves commercial buildings. There are a lot of commercial buildings that had been used for retail purposes in all parts of the city, including downtown, that are vacant right now. What ideas do you have to put empty retail space back into use, ways that these properties that had been used for decades could be made attractive again?
So as we've seen throughout the country, some of the greatest strategies to revitalize downtown is by moving forward with mixed-use development. And that has been done successfully downtown. I would agree, and when I was director of housing, I thought that we were losing too many of our upper floors to student housing. They're being carved up. Unfortunately, many of those existing buildings, there was nothing we can do to prevent that, just based on city code. But let's look at our commercial corridors in the First Ward, on the west side, on the south side, right? All across the city, and on the north side in particular, we have key commercial sites in which there's no plan. And my department, the Department of Planning, Housing, Community Development, left this administration with hundreds of thousands of dollars of New York State planning grants for the north side, for First Ward. And really, we're just kind of left alone. There's not much work that's been happening. Emerson Park was left until just recently. The old giant grocery store on Main Street, right, is abandoned. We have the Binghamton Plaza, which is a sinking ship, right? Tenant after tenant jumping ground. We need bold solutions. We have $500,000 through this once-in-a-lifetime transformative economic development opportunity.
500 million, you meant.
500 million, excuse me, thank you. That's way more transformative. And really, there hasn't been a lot of visioning. Instead of waiting for developers to come, we're going to set plans and then go out to the development community and say, this is what our neighborhood wants, this is what we need, do you want to partner with us? And then we'll partner with them.
Mayor David, in terms of making former retail space more attractive for future uses, whether it's downtown or in other parts of the city.
Sure. Well, I guess let me pick up where my opponent left off. The last thing that he just said was, we are going to go out to developers and to tell them basically what we need and have them respond accordingly. That is not how the market works. The market determines what sort of development takes place. Certainly, the city plays a role with regards to what sort of development we'd like to see in the city, but the concept that we're just going to go out and have a big visioning plan and then go out and tell these developers what to do, how well did that work under the previous administration? So this is another area where I think there's just a lot of talk. How did this work over the course of the previous years under the Ryan administration? I agree that mixed-use development, that's what we have been pursuing. We have multiple projects that are in various stages of development with regards to the upper floors and the first floors. That has really been among the cornerstone of projects we have tried to implement. I think in the next 4 years, I'd like to see more business districts, whether it's the First Ward, South Side, West Side, to duplicate some of the success that we're seeing downtown. But where that started was having Binghamton University have a presence in downtown. That's the $30 million community center on Washington Street. That was the real catalyst for development and growth. I think that there's more opportunities for growth in our neighborhood business districts, but the concept again that there were all these plans and money that was left behind. I would really ask people to think about this for a second. The concept that you spent 8 years coming up with a plan just to hand over to the next administration, whomever it might be, versus look what you've seen over the course of this 4 years, action and results.
Mayor David, the next question will be posed to you first, and it involves downtown and specifically Boscov's.
Mm-hmm.
What steps should the city take to try to retain the Boscov's department store in the place that it's occupied for the last few decades on Court Street?
Well, really, it's more what steps are we taking, because this is something that's been going on. I mean, this is an active discussion with Jim Boscov's, who's the head of Boscov's right now. That building is plagued with problems. And make no mistake, if action is not taken with regards to that building itself, they will have no choice but to leave, whether it's the mechanicals, the HVAC, the escalator, the roof, the facade. There are some major cosmetic and structural problems with that building. There's approximately roughly 2 years left on that lease, and I have active conversations with Boscov's. They are currently being approached to fill some of the space in the Oakdale Mall in Johnson City, and I think it is imperative that we work to keep Boscov's downtown. He wants to stay. Boscov's wants to stay downtown, And a big part of that is they will tell you their sales are no longer decreasing at the levels that they had been previously because of what's going on in downtown Binghamton. So they want to stay. There are also some challenges with the Water Street parking ramp. Again, another ramp that has been basically neglected. I remember when the previous administration took office, there was a slab of the ramp that fell off and sliced through a tractor trailer. You really didn't see much worth of investment in that ramp or any of the ramps. We have a multi-million-dollar project going on to stabilize some of the structural components in that ramp. It's a far cry from what needs to be done, but again, steps in the right direction.
Mr. Abdelazim, what should the city do to keep the Boscov store open at its downtown site?
Well, we've seen what can happen to a neighborhood, in particular in downtown, when you lose key amenities, right? When my opponent sold his building and we lost the one full grocery store downtown, many of those seniors now are struggling without that amenity. So Boscov's is another key anchor to downtown. But I would go in with very honest discussions. I'm not going to open the city's kitty bank just to please the owners. We're going to work with them and we're going to demand some investments. That's what happened before when there was an extension of the pilot by the Binghamton Local Development Corporation. That corporation put on stipulations that they make substantial investments in the roof. I believe it was over $1 million, and that has helped. So we need to play the same thing, right? I mean, we saw another downtown business owner say, build me a parking lot for $500,000 or I leave. Well, that didn't happen, but that business owner is still in downtown because they see a lot of potential. So I'm not somebody who's going to sell the city down the river just to please one or two business owners. They need to be genuine partners, and we will work with them. But it is a mutual partnership because at the same time, Bob, our neighborhoods need a lot of focus and attention. Downtown's doing well, and there is a great deal of potential. So those who want to stay there and be a part of that, you need to invest.
The next question directed first to Mr. Abdelazim, and this is a topic that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think it's important, dealing with parks and green space in the city of Binghamton. What would you propose in terms of improving, enhancing the existing city parks, and would you look to increase green space in the city in the next 4 years?
Absolutely, and let's talk a little bit about that. First, in regards to enhancing our parks, we can't take a whack-a-mole approach to our infrastructure, right? And that's really what's happened in the last 4 years. Everybody stay focused on the shiny new roads. Meanwhile, the largest infrastructure project in the city and Broome County's history, the joint sewage treatment plant, is a total disaster, ballooned to $365 million. The flood walls were ignored. There's a report of improvements that need to happen at City Hall, and particularly in the fire facilities, that have been ignored. Life-saving improvements from a report in 2015 that have been basically buried and ignored. That's because there's no comprehensive and strategic approach to our infrastructure. That's what I promised. We're going to put forward the first 10-year capital improvement program because we have hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure assets. We can't just be picking and choosing based on which gives us the most PR value, which is going to help with our re-election chances. We have to be looking at them fiscally responsible. That's exactly what I'm going to do. But when it comes to our parks, Bob, I have 2 minutes. When it comes to our parks, I have a record on this. With absolutely no local tax dollars, we beautified or created a series of new neighborhood parks, working in partnership with the university, with United Way, and the residents. We did that through creativity, through partnership. We're going to continue to do that under Mayoral under Mayor Abdelazim, excuse me. But in regards to green space, there was no urban forestry plan. We did that. There was no green stormwater infrastructure program. We did that. I did that as the director of planning with my team. We're going to expand that effort because it's a chance to make our community more resilient.
Mayor David, when it comes to city parks, any specific changes that you would look forward to implementing in the next 4 years? And also, would you work to expand available green space in the city?
Sure. Let's just to touch on some of the points from my opponent. You know, again, infrastructure was not a word that was in the vocabulary of the previous administration. This 4 years we have addressed more streets in 4 years than the previous administration did in 8. We have are addressing many of our parking ramps, our bridges, our water facilities, the joint sewage treatment plant. You talk about the report for City Hall, which is I'm not even quite sure what you're talking about, because we are advancing plans to fix the floor in the fire department. I don't know why you keep saying that we're not. You keep talking about flood walls. Well, I think you forget about the fact that with the flood walls, the first call I got from the DEC was about how the city of Binghamton was given 5-year period to inspect the flood wall conduits, but no action was taken. And I got a call within my first 5 weeks that said, we're going to give you 45 days to inspect the flood wall conduits, or your FEMA funding is going to be in jeopardy. We got the job done, but make no mistake, that took a big portion of our first year, and the previous administration had 5 years, and they weren't even aware. It was just finger pointing on who knew what when. Those were the sorts of things that we were dealing with infrastructure in our first year. You talk about parks. What about the largest park investment in decades is the Our Space Park at Recreation Park, a grant-funded $1 million park. We worked to make that project a reality. With regards to green space, I thought that was one of the things that I was being criticized by my opponent for, was when we demolish buildings, the fact that there is green space being left. So you can't have it both ways.
Those are weeded lots.
They're not weeded lots, but again, we've worked with Vines, which was an organization created a Project Advance under the previous administration. And you know what? Not everything is bad. Unlike my opponent, I'm not just going to sit here and say everything that Rich David is doing is bad. There were some bright spots and positive things that we are working to build on. That was one of them. It's a great organization, and we'll work with them to expand as much as possible.
Our next question, directed first to Mayor David. 7 months ago, Mayor, you fired the Public Works Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner following the big blizzard in March. You said the snowstorm exposed long-term deficiencies in the Public Works operation, and you said a top-to-bottom overhaul of the Public Works Department was underway. So what changes do you believe should be considered in the department? And in this case, what changes have been made as part of the top-to-bottom overhaul that was announced in March?
Well, it really has to do with regards to training and the plans and different types of equipment that is being purchased. We've worked with Jack Williams from the New York State Department of Transportation with regards to how the city's operations were being handled. We have made a variety of different purchases, whether it is in regards to vehicles, whether it's in regards to chains on tires, whether it's in regards to the different type of plow blades that we're using. In fact, we have another round of training that's beginning, annual training with regards to the drivers and examining the routes as well. So I think a lot has been done during a short period of time, but I feel that I have advanced many of the reviews in that department that I said I would do, and I'm very confident going into this winter season, not just with regards to snow, but with regards to all of the operations in the Public Works Department.
Mr. Abdelazim, what changes do you think might be implemented in the Public Works Department?
Well, I just want to go back to that one question again. We had the commercial, but the reality is that, and my opponent knows this, is that the millions of dollars of federal and state that was secured for Exchange Street Bridge, East Clinton Street Bridge, Front Street, railroad reconstruction, they were all secured under the prior administration.
Not true.
That is absolutely true.
Not true.
I have right here the 2013 BMTS plan that has all of those projects listed. Do you want to see it?
That's just
okay.
not true.
Anyways, anyone can go online and Google that. But in regards to your question, right? So this was one of those instances where the last administration led the city through 3 traumatic floods. This administration had one challenge: Snowstorm Stella. It was a disaster, right? I mean, and the mayor made unilateral decisions that were reckless and put motorists' lives at risk and the lives of public employees who were out there trying to clear the streets. And he threw his commissioners under the bus. Just months before, at his State of the City address, he talked about how he had done a thorough review of every department from A to Z, and we've improved everything. And then a few months later, he says there's long-term deficiencies that have been observed. He has consistently made budget decisions every year that put the public works in a position to fail. It was understaffed, under-equipped. The commercial versus reality.
The next question, directed first to Mr. Abdelazim. What consideration, if any, should be given to privatizing existing city services?
I am not a fan of privatization. There was one instance where, looking at the golf course, I think there was one employee up there, and there was consensus with city council and others that it made far more sense to privatize management of the golf course while maintaining public ownership of that asset. But I think the mayor's already made moves to privatize trash collection. And I think that moves us in the wrong direction, because then it undermines our ability to deal with emergencies. It's those same CDL licensed drivers that are driving around in our trash trucks that help clear the snow. And so I think it would be a major problem. I believe that government can be a positive force in people's lives. And too long we've had, from the top down, this demonization of government, this demonization of public employees. Yeah, when you don't have leadership that demands excellence, when you don't have leadership that moves forward with forward-thinking solutions, that's what you get. But under my leadership, we are going to do more with less, and we are going to serve with integrity and excellence.
Should, Mayor David, any consideration be given to privatizing existing city services?
Just to be very clear, I've taken no steps whatsoever in any direction with regards to privatization. That is just a complete falsehood, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. I do believe that what any good leader does is take a look at a variety of different scenarios. And I haven't even looked at this sort of scenario for public works. But sometimes, in the absence of change, what you're left with is the status quo. So you should be looking at how to do things differently. And sometimes the end result of that is things are working the way they should, and there shouldn't be a change. And sometimes there are opportunities to do things better, and sometimes you may end up making bold and sweeping changes. But again, if you're not constantly looking to do things different, then you're just doing things the way they've been done all along, and that's not what innovative leaders do. That's not what business leaders do. So again, I have made no steps whatsoever to make any of those sorts of changes with regards to public works, and it's not something that's currently on my radar screen.
Next question involves an important project, important facility for the city of Binghamton, Johnson City residents, and many other municipalities. What steps should be taken, Mayor David, to assure that the major construction project at the Binghamton-Johnson City Joint Sewage Treatment Plant can continue without delay, and after the construction project is completed, to improve operations at the plant?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is an area where there's just so much misinformation being distributed, particularly on the part of my opponent, starting with what the overall price tag is for this project. The price tag is approximately $260 million. The amount of money that the ratepayers are on the hook for is more than that. It's approximately $330 million, because there is about $100 million worth of investments that were made prior to 2014 and the flood of 2011 that ratepayers are still responsible for. But the bottom line is, this is another area where the plan that was left on the table simply didn't work from the previous administration. And we went to the DEC, and they acknowledged that more needed to be done. I think what most people don't realize is that the DEC is involved in every single aspect of this operation. It's not just the mayor of Binghamton and Johnson City. They have to approve everything. We have put all of this information on the city's website. There's monthly and quarterly documents that people can go on and take a look at exactly what's going on this project. The concept that things are being done in secrecy is frankly ridiculous. But this is a very expensive project, and what we have done is we've gone out and secured millions of. There was just a $10 million grant we secured the other day for this project. In the grand schemes of $250 million, I recognize it's just a drop in the bucket, but we are doing everything that we can to secure additional grant funds to minimize the impact that's going to happen.
Mr. Abdelazim, in terms of the ongoing construction project, and then after it's done, trying to ensure that operations can be improved at the treatment plant in Vestal.
Yeah, first, making no steps towards privatization. One of the first things the administration, my opponent, did was he sold a bunch of paving and public works equipment for pennies on the dollars at an auction, He was able to do far more street reconstruction because he used private contractors, and he didn't rebuild the transfer station with a FEMA grant, and now he's using private haulers to supplement our services. So those are some of the facts. In regards to the cost, April 5th, 2017, the City Council passed an ordinance increasing the cost to $365 million. So there's no misinformation. It's just Mayor David wants us to keep our focus on the shiny new roads. This is an unmitigated disaster. He took this in a new direction. The DEC doesn't really have any say into how you accomplish the goals. It's a consent order, and it's basically saying make sure you have clean effluent. So municipalities go to the DEC and say, here's how we want to do it, and they say, okay, and by this timeline. So the approach that this administration has taken is going to impact ratepayers for decades. Literally, if you've saved $45 on the proposed tax decrease, put that away, because your sewer bills are going to go up hundreds of dollars in the coming years. Because of his decisions.
We're running low on time. I'm going to ask each candidate to spend about a minute with a closing statement. First closing statement to Mr. Abdelazim.
I'm going last.
You're right. You're correct on that.
Okay, I apologize.
Right.
Mayor David.
So, look, thank you. Thanks, Bob, for the opportunity. Thank you to my opponent. We don't agree on everything, obviously, but the bottom line is, again, my opponent had an opportunity. He had 8 years to take action, take leadership, deliver results. Residents deserve a mayor who focuses on the people, not on ideological platforms or personal agendas. Residents deserve a mayor who's not going to raise taxes 52%. They deserve a mayor who won't gut the police department and compromise public safety. They deserve a mayor who won't neglect our neighborhoods, like my opponent in the previous administration did. Residents deserve a mayor who will make public safety, taxes, infrastructure, neighborhoods, youth a priority. Election years, they bring inflammatory attacks. My opponent has made this campaign no different, but Binghamton residents don't want any more empty political stunts. They want and deserve more results. I ran for mayor because I love Binghamton and enjoy serving the public. I'm grateful for the opportunity I've been given, and I respectfully ask for your vote November 7th so we can continue providing results and moving Binghamton forward.
Thank you, Mayor David. Mr. Abdelazim, your closing statement.
It's going to sound very familiar because he basically appropriated my entire closing statement from the last debate. I'm running for mayor because I care deeply about my hometown and our shared future. This is all about our neighborhoods and the people who live there, and we can't afford 4 more years of failed approaches, inaction, and missed opportunities. You deserve a mayor who understands how to protect our neighborhoods from the threats posed by slumlords, blight, and the coming high cost of flood insurance. Residents deserve a mayor who will restore morale in the police department. They deserve a mayor who will approach the opioid epidemic with teamwork, urgency, and compassion. You deserve a mayor who will invest in our youth and our seniors and be a strong ally to local labor. You deserve a mayor who can lead us through natural disasters, whether floods or snowstorms. You deserve a mayor who lifts up those voices who want to create a community free of discrimination. A mayor who will bring honesty and openness to City Hall. A mayor who will always put the health and safety of our residents and our neighborhoods above all else. The future of our neighborhoods is in your hands if you're listening. It would be an absolute honor and a humbling privilege to serve my hometown as mayor. I respectfully ask for your vote on November 7th. I want to thank Bob, WNBF, as well as my opponent, Mayor David. This has been a very engaging conversation.
And I wish we had more time. One final question for each
of you. Bob.
We could go on for hours. One final question for each of you. Mayor David, you've been on our program on a regular basis since you took office every 2 weeks. Would you continue to do that in the next 4 years to answer questions?
Ooh, interesting. I will always come on your show to answer questions.
Every 2 weeks?
I'm going to keep you in suspense, Bob.
Mr. Abdelazim, would you be willing to, if you win on November 7th, to continue what has been a tradition?
Absolutely.
Every 2 weeks.
We are going to make a far more interactive and transparent City Hall, and this will just be one way in which we do that.
You're keeping me in suspense, Mayor David.
What's that line you used to say? Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. One really quick question for each of you. Mayor David, what's your favorite place in Binghamton to relax?
I enjoy relaxing at home. Frankly, I spend a lot of time out in the community, and I think many people know I live downtown. I renovated a building. I enjoy spending time downtown.
Mr. Abdelazim, your favorite place in Binghamton to relax?
Yeah, I live on Tremont, so not too far from the river trail. And so I bring my son often down to Confluence Park, and we walk up and down the trails. It's very peaceful and beautiful.
Gentlemen, thank you. Mayor Richard David and the challenger, Tarik Abdelazim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
The news is next on News Radio 1290, WNBF Binghamton and WNBF.com.